That's not your business. 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 That's not your business.
The road has impacted me and my family, my business, in the way that before, if I'm not here as yet and my customers call me, I would have to tell them wait 30 to 45 minutes. But now, when they call me, I tell them, okay, give me 10, 15 minutes. Some of them even up to just gas. The road good, I go come and meet you. They just come in now.
Since the rehabilitation was has commenced, although it is not 100% completed, but we are already realizing an increase in finances, in the time as to when we get to Solibus. It takes approximately 5 minutes from Pierre to Solibus as opposed to half an hour. I would like to personally endorse Bradley Felix for our next rep in the coming general election.
I approve him because he's working and I see he keep on working.
Over the past 5 years, every single decision we have taken has been to fertilize prosperity for today and to sow the seeds of progress for our nation 10 years from now. Every budget we delivered, every investment we attracted, every infrastructural project we approved, and those we re-engineered are meant for our children, our future, our St. Lucia. The United Workers' Party. Let's keep working.
We can't trust labor. We can't trust labor. Between 2012 and 2016, labor destroyed our lives. They made us poorer by making us pay higher electricity bills. We can't trust labor. They made us poorer by making us pay higher water bills. They made us poorer by making us pay higher food bills. Then they took away 5% of our money as workers. No one was safe. Even the dead were made to pay VAT. They put VAT on funerals. They are the same old Labour Party. They haven't changed. Don't go backwards with Labour.
Members, the question is that be it resolved, the House of Assembly agrees to the lifting of the suspension without prejudice to the legal action by the member for Mico South against his suspension, and be it further resolved that the lifting of the suspension shall be effective immediately following the passage of this motion, and the member will be at liberty to carry on his duties in service of the House and the constituency of Mico South. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
And I'm saying, and I'm asking everyone to watch what they eat and eat what they watch. Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Wait, first of all, you're not going to speed past that like you didn't just say what you just said.
Watch what they eat and eat what they watch.
Less than 2 years into the reign of the Labour regime, St. Lucia's patrimony is not only under threat by Philip Pierre's bad policies, but is being recklessly sold to friends, family and foreigners. The latest act of detaching St. Lucia from her most prized lands came with the sale of the Banand lands along the Castries Harbour. The lands were owned by the National Housing Corporation. In 2013, the 2.5 acres was valued at about $70 a square foot for a total cost value of $7 million, proving to be a valuable asset for the state. However, in December of 2021, a decision was taken by Housing Minister Richard Frederick to dispose of the high-value assets. Former SLP Senator and prospective candidate Terence Skinny Sinclair was hired to undertake the property valuation. His report assessed the market value at $3.5 million. That's half of what the lands were going for 10 years ago. Prime waterfront property enclosing one of the most scenic ports in the Caribbean, with thriving commercial and tourism activity. And for whatever reason, the value of the lands was further reduced to $25 a square foot for sale at a mere $2.5 million. The beneficiary? The daughter of Reno Kajada.
But has a different name. So was that because she's genuinely buying the land? Is that they were just trying to avoid detection?
UWP leader Alan Chastney has raised critical questions concerning this blatant act of nepotism. What becomes of the lands when the new owners of the Castries port come in? How would the land factor into the plans for the redevelopment of the harbor to include a fishing village at Banans Bay? Would the now owners sell it off for a hefty profit? Why were the lands not kept for national development? Why not allow Invest St. Lucia or SASPA to take ownership? According to Frederick, SASPA rejected an offer to purchase. But where were Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Philip Pierre, Investment Minister Ernest Delaire, and Infrastructure Minister Stevenson King?
So you're telling me it was offered to them and neither one of them saw it fit to cause SLASPA to go ahead and buy the land? Instead, the Minister of Housing said that there was no response from SLASPA. Why wasn't the land offered to Invest? Who is the Minister of Invest Solution? Isn't it not Ernest Hilaire? Is he not the district rep for that area? You would think that after spearheading the investment by GPH to fix up Banans, that would be a natural expansion, area of an expansion, and that by getting invested to buy it, give them the opportunity to make sure there's a proper development in that area. None of these people said anything.
The National Housing Corporation has become a pawn in the games that Richard plays, with a board too intimidated to challenge him. Chairman Mikey Pilgrim and Deputy Chairman John Peters have for years purported themselves to be men of integrity, but today sit idly by, aiding and abetting Richard Frederick in his deeds.
There was a property purchased at the bottom of the chaussee for $1.8 million, and the person they purchased the land from is the lawyer on the National Housing Committee. No question. Nobody sees anything wrong with this. We have no problems with it. This is not innuendo. These are facts that you can go and check for yourself. Go down to the registry.
Wake up, St. Lucia. This is just another example that Pierre is putting you worse. Less than 2 years into the reign of the Labour regime, St. Lucia's patrimony is not only under threat by Philip Pierre's bad policies, but is being recklessly sold to friends, family and foreigners. The latest act of detaching St. Lucia from her most prized lands came with the sale of the Banand lands along the Castries Harbour. The lands were owned by the National Housing Corporation. In 2013, the 2.5 acres was valued at about $70 a square foot, for a total cost value of $7 million, proving to be a valuable asset for the state. However, in December of 2021, a decision was taken by Housing Minister Richard Frederick to dispose of the high-value assets. Former SLP Senator and prospective candidate Terence Skinny Sinclair was hired to undertake the property valuation. His report assessed the market value at $3.5 million. That's half of what the lands were going for 10 years ago. Prime waterfront property enclosing one of the most scenic ports in the Caribbean, with thriving commercial and tourism activity. And for whatever reason, the value of the lands was further reduced to $25 a square foot for sale at a mere $2.5 million. The beneficiary? The daughter of Reno Kajada.
But has a different name. So was that because she's genuinely buying the land? Is that they were just trying to avoid detection?
UWP leader Alan Chastney has raised critical questions concerning this blatant act of nepotism. What becomes of the lands when the new owners of the Castries port come in? How would the land factor into the plans for the redevelopment of the harbor to include a fishing village at Banans Bay? Would the now owners sell it off for a hefty profit? Why were the lands not kept for national development? Why not allow investing Lucia or SASPA to take ownership? According to Frederick, SASPA rejected an offer to purchase. But where were Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Philip Pierre, Investment Minister Ernest Delaire, and Infrastructure Minister Stevenson King?
So you're telling me it was offered to them and neither one of them saw it fit to cause SLASPA to go ahead and buy the land? Instead, the Minister of Housing said that there was no response from SLASPA. Why wasn't the land offered to invest? Who is the Minister of Invest in Lucia? Isn't it not Ernest Hilaire? Is he not the district rep for that area? You would think that after spearheading the investment by GPH to fix up Banans, that would be a natural expansion, area of an expansion, and that by getting invested to buy it, give them the opportunity to make sure there was a proper development in that area. None of these people said anything.
The National Housing Corporation has become a pawn in the games that Richard plays, with a board too intimidated to challenge him. Chairman Mikey Pilgrim and Deputy Chairman John Peters have for years purported themselves to be men of integrity, but today sit idly by, aiding and abetting Richard Frederick in his deeds.
There was a property purchased at the bottom of the chaussee for $1.8 million, and the person they purchased the land from is the lawyer on the National Housing Committee. No question. Nobody sees anything wrong with this. We have no problems with it. This is not innuendo. These are facts that you can go and check for yourself. Go down to the registry.
Wake up, Saint Lucia. This is just another example that Pierre is putting you worse.
Good morning, everyone. Let me say a special good morning to members of the media. Special good morning to those listening to us on live stream. This morning, this press conference is convened by the United Workers' Party specifically to deal with a number of national pertinent issues that is of grave concern to us and to the nation. Matters such as the issue of the 2.5% levy that was placed on citizens of St. Lucia for security and health, and as well the corruption and brazen illegal activities of sitting government ministers, and the fact that they behave in such a dishonorable manner to the extent that they even openly declare their illegal, unsavory activities. And so we want to make an appeal to the government, the leadership of the government, so that those matters can be dealt with for the benefit and interests of this country, for the sake of our reputation and the dignity of the institution called government. So this morning we have with us Senator Dominic Fede, who is also the Deputy Political Leader of the United Workers' Party. We have another Deputy Political Leader, Mr. Guy Joseph, and of course we have the political leader and leader of the opposition, the Honorable Alan Chasney. To start things off, I am going to hand over to Senator Dominic Fede, who will be dealing specifically with the issue of the 2.5% levy imposed on St. Lucian, causing further hardship to the high cost of living that we are experiencing. Senator Dominic, over to you.
Thank you, Spider. Political leader, deputy political leader, Guy Joseph, and our PR. Facebook listeners, good morning to the people of St. Lucia. The United Workers' Party demands the immediate and absolute suspension of the 2.5 health and security levy. This is in response to the rising cost of living on a number of consumers. It is also in response to confusion and frustration and mounting challenges within the business community, in addition to a very increasing global economic and volatile political situation gripping the world at this time. It is no doubt that even before the implementation of this tax, St. Lucians were gripping or being gripped by a global inflation situation, which saw tremendous increases in the price of ordinary consumables such as bread and bus fares and electricity prices and LPG cooking gas and a whole range of items. In the supermarkets we saw food increases, we saw increases to gas and diesel when we visit gas stations to purchase various items. And this has caused a significant strain on the already challenged budgets of many families who have seen no real shift in their income upwards. That in itself has created a very difficult situation on the backs of ordinary consumers in St. Lucia. And so, in response to an already bad situation, the government came up with a health and security levy. Even before the tax was implemented, our political leader has had reasons to caution the government. He wrote to the government indicating that this would further burden consumers, that this would further create strain and instill even increased economic hardship. The government did not listen. We see organizations like the Chamber came out and to say, look, this tax is a bad idea. Implementing it right now is going to be very difficult on a host of businesses. So having to deal with the inflation problem and now a 2.5% tax has made living in St. Lucia more difficult, has made affording basic commodities such as cheese and tuna fish and all the items that people use on an everyday basis, they have caused it to be out of the reach of the ordinary citizens of this country. And so we're calling, therefore, for the immediate suspension and absolute removal of this tax for the time being. The government has gone through great pains to say to us that they have had a very exhaustive exemption list in Schedule 3 of the legislation, the Health and Security Levy. And in Schedule 3, there's a whole list of items which they said are covered. However, notices from KFC, a food supplier, has made it very starkly that even though the government has sought to make these goods exempt from the levy, that there is still a very crushing blow on the price of these commodities. Food. We saw the letter from KFC. But what the letter from KFC has clearly shown is that the government does not understand the impact that this tax is going to have on your everyday life. And so if we take, for example, the cost of business, which has gone up. So if we look at Massey stores, we would see that in the case of Massey stores, when they bring in a container, they have got to pay not just the CIF price on those items that attract the levy, but outside of those items, they've got to pay the brokerage fees. They've got to pay 2.5 on the trucking fees. They've got to pay 2.5 on their security costs. They've got to pay 2.5 on their advertising costs. They've got to pay 2.5 on their rent. They've got to pay 2.5 on their accounting when accounting firms come to audit their books. And so what do you think is going to happen to items such as tuna fish, rice, flour, sugar, and all those commodities sold by Massey? All those commodities that you and I rely on to live, to get by. Groceries will go up, Mr. Prime Minister. And so for this reason, the United Workers' Party is calling on the government to absolutely and immediately suspend the 2.5% levy, because this is dealing a crushing blow on the ability of many families to survive. Let me turn my attention a little bit to businesses. The business community is also grappling with the repercussions of this policy. They have made it clear through the chamber that this tax is a severely bad idea. The chamber begged the government to suspend this tax to January 2024. The government, unfortunately, did not listen. Businesses indicated that, one, it was very difficult for them to, in such a short space of time, institute the arrangements to administer this tax, to ensure that they were in a good position to ensure that they adjust their computers, to adjust their systems, so that they can start to collect this tax on behalf of the government as the law mandates. Today, many businesses are exposed to the real and present danger that their businesses could run afoul of the law, and as a result, bringing about significant penalties to them if they, for example, unwittingly break the law because of their inability, because of the lack of training, because of the very urgent nature by which they need to implement this tax. In addition to this confusion, in addition to this very untenable and unfair situation, what we are also seeing is that this tax is going to impede the growth and expansion of business. If you're going to carry up the cost, people need to make investments. People need to make sure that they pay this tax upfront. The cash flow of many businesses are going to be affected. Many businesses have no avenue by which to implement this tax on the backs of the consumers. They have no avenue to get rebates. As bad as the value-added tax VAT is, it is far better for businesses. And a lot of businesses have actually said to government, why didn't you just increase the 2.5% value-added tax on consumers? It is my strong suspicion that the Philip J. Perry administration, instead, they did what they do best. They took the political option. They reasoned politically. They set a policy based on politics rather than your interest, you the people of St. Lucia. And so therefore, we have found ourselves in a very difficult situation. Our businesses have found themselves in a very precarious situation. So not only do we have businesses that are confused and frustrated, but we also have businesses that will struggle to help to reduce the unemployment rate. The private sector is the engine of growth in this country. And when you are going to encumber the private sector, as the government has with this tax, it tells me that the government's economic plan is wrong. Mr. Prime Minister, we're calling on you, we're demanding that you suspend immediately and absolutely the 2.5% levy. The other reason why we're calling today for this levy to be suspended is that of the global economic situation and the political volatility that we see that exists in today's global environment. Not only do we have the increasing volatility and uncertainty caused by the ongoing Russian-Ukraine war, but we continue to see increased instability in the Middle East, which is no doubt going to impact the production of oil. Already we see that markets are responding to what has happened in Israel and Palestine, and we see that the prices of oil are starting to go up, oil prices per barrel. This is going to increase energy costs. This is going to increase the cost of doing business. This is going to increase the cost of all those products that we manufacture, that we use in our supermarkets on a daily basis, that are coming in through our ports. And the 2.5% levy is only going to compound an already bad situation. We call on the government to immediately and absolutely suspend the 2.5% levy, given what is taking place in the world economically and politically. The government has no reason to do that, given that tax revenue in this financial year showed that the government has picked up an additional $81 million in tax revenue. Tax revenue has rebounded from the amazing policies that we have set out to get this economy rebounded from COVID. And so if the government was trying to raise $30 million, the last option should have been to impose a tax like this on the backs of you, ordinary consumers, on the backs of you, small businesses, on the backs of medium and large businesses, the people whom we depend on to generate jobs and create opportunity within this country. And so therefore, this tax needs to be suspended immediately and absolutely, so that we can free up our businesses, so that we can ease the burden that mothers, especially single mothers, vulnerable citizens, are feeling in this country today because of this very burdensome situation placed on its back by the Philip J. Perry administration. The list of items which this will attract this tax is extremely exhaustive. We see things like human hair. So if you go, you buy braids, you buy weave or a wig, the government will tax you 2.5%. You buy charcoal from the supermarket, the government will tax you 2.5%. You do a death announcement, for example. You take an advertising at DBS or any of the stations, and under Schedule 2 of the Act, advertising is also included. And so therefore, if you're doing a fundraiser for medical purposes, that fundraising ad attracts a 2.5%. If you have a church crusade and you take an ad with any of the TV stations, they have got to collect an additional 2.5% from the government. Medical equipment in Schedule 1 of services. Now this is really uncaring, ill thought out, that you are going to tax medical equipment. This tax is going to have a debilitating impact on the healthcare situation of this country. The cost of healthcare will no doubt go up on the backs of ordinary citizens. It says here in Schedule 1 of the Act that optical, photographic, cinematograph, measuring, checking, precision medical or surgical instruments and apparatus, parts and accessories thereof will attract this 2.5%, number 90 of Schedule 1. Now, if private clinics are going to have to pay 2.5 in importing various equipment for CT scans, MRI scans, and other tests that you need to do, it means they pay 2.5%. They pay the broker 2.5%. The rent of these doctors' clinics will also go up. When the doctor's clinic go and they do their accounting, they have to pay another 2.5%. So all around what we see is that in very important industries, that 2.5% is added on, and there's a domino effect that's going to go straight to you, the end consumer, you, the people of St. Lucia, will have to pay the brunt of this cost because you have no one to pass it on to. And so the Philip J. Perry administration has made a fundamental error. This is a fatal mistake which impacts your life in such a tremendous way. When we look at, they even charging a walking stick, a man who's disabled or an elderly man who needs a walking stick for mobility, if his family member sends him a walking stick from overseas, he has to pay that 2.5%. This is unconscionable. I don't think that the government has thought this through properly, because there are too many things that are being impacted here by this 2.5%. And it's not just 2.5% once. All of these items are going to attract various transactions. If you're buying a car, those individuals, you want to buy a little second-hand car because you can't afford a brand new car. That car will attract 2.5 at the ports. You pay the broker 2.5. You buy accessories for the car, it's 2.5%. The bill of sale from the lawyer's office, 2.5%. So we see that on a range of things that you need to live day to day, even transportation, if you try to have private transportation, that too will attract the 2.5%. You go to the cinema, they tax you 2.5%. This is just a bad idea, and we demand the absolute and immediate suspension of this tax. Failing to listen, the United Workers' Party will continue to march. We will continue to advocate. We will continue to apply the pressure and advocate on behalf of you, the people of St. Lucia, until the government listens, until they release you from the shackles of this 2.5% levy, which is having untold damage on you, the people of St. Lucia, that have seen no real increases in your salaries. While this is happening, this is unnecessary, and the United Workers' Party cannot but demand strongly that the government remove this unfortunate burden on your backs. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Fede, for this exposition on this burdensome 2.5% levy that has been imposed on St. Lucia. And unlike the inflation that is caused by the importation of goods that we have very little control over, this one, government has direct control over it. So this is additional inflation imposed upon us by our government. And so, you know, when we look at it, they could, like Senator Dominic mentioned, the fact that they could have put a 2.5% on VAT, but of course they know that would have been a mistake, because we saw the United Workers' Party government, last government, removing 2.5%, which augured well, not just for the economy, but for the average man and woman, especially mothers, where it comes to groceries and providing for their families. But this tax, unlike the 2.5% VAT, is even worse, because it is a compounded tax. And do not forget that there are cases where that 2.5 is imposed for products and in addition for services. And so at the end of the day, it is not simply 2.5%. And of course, that 2.5% is 2.5% that is added after VAT. So at the end of the day, it is much worse than the 50% that they already had, that we had given St. Lucians a relief from by reducing it to 2.5%. And now they have further burdened St. Lucians, made the situation worse by putting that compounded tax. Now, if a government that is concerned about the people's plight is acting in the interest of the people, they would seek, given the current situation where cost of living is so high already, inflation in this country is so high, they would take measures to ameliorate some of that pressure from especially housewives, single mothers, households where there are people who are unemployed, rather than to further burden St. Lucians and worsen their situation with this 2.5% levy. So St. Lucians are feeling the squeeze and are taking note of what's going on, and I'm hoping that our government will respond, and the request is that they remove this 2.5. They rescind that tax that has been imposed on St. Lucia and remove it to give St. Lucia an ease. So now I will call on our second speaker, Deputy Political Leader. Sorry, I will call first on the political leader. And the political leader will be addressing a very serious subject that I consider to be corruption in government, that I consider to be illegality by government officials, and the brazen, blatant disregard for the rule of law and disrespect for the offices that certain individuals hold. As a matter of fact, I think I'd better let the political leader expound on this current situation that is so concerning to us as a nation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Montoute. Ladies and gentlemen, over the last 2.5 years, we have seen a deliberate policy of this government to attack our democracy, to challenge the rule of law, and as a result of it, that they are undermining the national security of our country. I don't have to remind St. Lucians as to what the state of crime is in this country, and what we know the normal causes of crime, but the type of crime that we're seeing has had the added impetus, I think, of the arrogant, inept, incompetent, and unlawful actions of this government. Let us remember from the beginning of the results of the election, one of the first individuals to come out to speak was Hilaire. And he said that he had suffered in opposition and that his reputation had been maligned and that there were persons who attacked him, and that now that he was in a position of power, that he could use that power to go after people. Not my words. Those are his words. You would have thought that a person who just won an election on putting people first, that it was been the people's business, that would have been the first thing he would have addressed, not his own personal vendettas. We saw that the Prime Minister and the Speaker of the House went to a court hearing, and in his own words, to ensure that justice was being done. A Prime Minister and a Speaker of the House. Something as sacred as the separation between the judiciary and the political, the executive and parliamentarians. We saw the suspension of the Emergency Act. And again now, I want St. Lucians to maybe have a greater appreciation of what the opposition was saying. The Emergency Act is something that is specifically outlined in the Constitution. And it is there that when government has to take away any of the civil liberties of a citizen, that it must do it in a state of emergency. And the fundamental part of that state of emergency is the reporting. So let me give you the comparison. The Suppression Act that was created for crime in View Fort, which gives ordinary police officers extraordinary powers to go into your home, to put you under house arrest, to search your vehicle, to prevent you from walking or using your car. That has been in place for over a year. Now, in a state of emergency, there's a legal requirement that the police must keep a record of every time that they suppress a person's civil rights. So every single time that a police officer would confine somebody to their home, every time a police officer would go through somebody's home, search somebody's home, or search somebody's body, which would normally need a police warrant, that they are doing this and there's no record. 1 year. Can anybody tell us how many times police officers have confined people to their home? How many times police officers have searched people's homes without a warrant or searched individuals without a warrant? That is why the state of emergency is such an important part of our Constitution. And this government knowingly introduced a Suppression Act and have deprived persons in the South of their civil liberties and have kept no record and have given no reports to the general public and to account for their actions. Very recently, my court case, where the Attorney General wrote to the registrar complaining about how my case was implemented. That the Department of Justice, the Ministry of Justice, attempted to move the judge's clerk. That unprecedentedly, the judge came to the court and complained of political interference, highlighting these unusual actions by an Attorney General, and recused himself. And what have we now seen? That same judge now has been transferred to Grenada. So the fact that he was transferred to Grenada suggests to all of us that he didn't do anything wrong. But the optics of having a judge transferred, a judge that ruled against the government, the optics of that is damning on something as important as the separation of the judiciary from the executive. The SLP government have become dictators in our country. And they are blaring examples where some of us can describe that we're living in a police state. I call on all right-thinking St. Lucians today to take an account of what has happened over the last 2.5 years and to take this situation seriously. If we don't have a rule of law, if we don't have separation of powers, and if we don't stand up for those things, then we live in anarchy. Every man for himself, every man and every woman for themselves. So I bring that up because of what has recently transpired, and in particular, the statements that were made by Richard Frederick on his weekly show last Thursday. And first of all, we must remember that it was the same Richard Frederick in his resignation speech, if you remember, when he was in government in 2006 to 2011, that started off his speech by saying, I was a police officer and I was a lawyer. It's very important. He was, and everybody knows that he was a police officer. And everyone knows that he's been a lawyer for a long period of time. I want to read something which was an interview that Timothy Polio had in about 2005 with the then Prime Minister Kenny Anthony. And that was right after the by-elections and before the elections in 2006. And I'm reading it because of his description of Richard Frederick at that time. And he said, regardless of who we are, whenever we enter into public life, people turn us upside down, people turn us inside out. They look at you in every different direction, every facet. They're interested in your personal life, they become interested in your public life. Now I'm going to digress just a little, but I'll come to the heart of the matter. I believe that the Labour Party has a responsibility when it is contesting a general election, or any election for that matter, to share with the electorate its views on candidates. United Workers' Party has every right to look at the candidates of the St. Lucia Labour Party to share their views about those candidates. Character is always an issue in politics. It is always an issue to the electorate, and so I would think that Richard Frederick should not be immune from that process. He's entered into the political arena. He's entered into political life. Therefore, the Labour Party has a responsibility to the people at large to say, look, you must evaluate this candidate. This is what we know about this candidate, Richard Frederick. This is what we are concerned about this candidate. You must feel deep in your heart and in your conscience that you did the right thing to vote for that person. If after you've this amount of information and you decide to vote for that person, then we have to respect your judgment and accept your judgment, just as, for example, we've accepted the judgment of the people of Central Castries in the outcome of the by-election. If you remember that Richard Frederick had won a by-election. Now what is the frightening part that I refer to? Quite apart from those issues, when I spoke about being frightening, remember,
he indicated that Richard Frederick was the most frightening thing to happen in politics in St. Lucia. I really meant the history of Richard Frederick. Richard Frederick has had several encounters where firearms have been used. Take, for example, the case which went before the court, and you recall that the judge suggested that Richard was short-tempered. The judge rejected his account of the events. Means that the judge basically said that he lied. Call it what it is. This judge referred to the fact that he utilized a firearm, and he was appealing that decision. An appeal that we now know that he lost. And I don't want to say any more about that, but that's a fact. Then, too, you have the incident at Burger Plus, where Richard is alleged of accosting some security guard at Burger Plus. It is reported on the front page of The Voice. A firearm was pulled out there, were suggestions that he would use the firearm that he had, and he was frustrated. And of course, a recent incident involving Lang boys, again, that was reported in The Voice. We know, following that, there was an event that took place that has become now common known in our country as Operation Restore Confidence. A policy of the then United Workers' Party, headed by the then Prime Minister Stephenson King. And Operation Restore Confidence, the then Labour Party, accused Stephenson King, and in particular Richard Frederick, of establishing a hit list, and that police officers had been instructed to kill citizens of this country. So much so that the information that the Labour Party provided to the US government, to the British government, the French, Europeans, and the Canadians, that the Americans turned around and before the elections in 2011 withdrew the visa of Richard Frederick, both his personal visa as well as his diplomatic visa. And that when the Labour Party won the election, there was an expectation by those same international countries that the government was going to hold the police officers, politicians, and business people that were alleged to have been involved in this case accountable. And when in 2013, because remember the government won at the end of 2011, and by 2013, the US government grew frustrated and imposed what we now know today as a Leahy law on St. Lucia. And that Leahy law withdrew the participation of St. Lucia in any regional training and imposed visa restrictions on the officers that they believed were involved, specifically the hierarchy of the police force. As a result of that, the then Prime Minister Kenny Anthony agreed to bring Jamaican officers to investigate the Operation Restore Confidence and the allegations that were being made. And remember, Dr. Anthony is a lawyer and had previously been a prime minister for 2 terms. And Kenny Anthony also taught constitutional law. So it is difficult for me to ever believe that he did not know that the entity in our Constitution that's responsible for that investigation, overseeing the investigation, would be the DPP's office. Now, normally it would be the local police, but we would understood if the police were the ones that were being accused, it would be difficult for them to investigate themselves. Those Jamaican police officers came in here, and as a result of it, there was a report that was produced called Impacts. And probably one of the most damning things that came out of the impacts, and I believe that when Dr. Anthony gave his speech, an address to the nation, one of the first things that he said was what? That his allegations that there was a hit list that he said that he saw before the elections in 2011, that they verified and validated that statement. They went on to say in that report that there were corrupt politicians, there were corrupt business people, and there were corrupt police officers that were colluding Now, I say all of this because of what we've seen transpire last week, where the same Richard Frederick revealed that he was receiving information from police officers. Personal information of citizens of this country. We also know that Richard Frederick has been on a tirade of attacking public citizens. We're clearly aware of the persons from United Workers' Party that he's attacked. But more recently, he's made public his attacks on Barbara Jacobs and Richard Peterkin, Jan Gustav. Ordinary citizens of St. Lucia. This revelation by Richard, it's so egregious. It's so reckless. It's so dangerous that as the leader of the opposition, I've had no choice but to pen a letter to the Commissioner of Police. And I'd like to read that letter. This letter has been sent off to the Commissioner of Police today, and it's been copied to the Prime Minister and the Minister of National Security, the Minister of Home Affairs, the President of the Bar Association, the President of the Chamber of Commerce, the Chairman of the Integrity Commission, as well as the Chairman of the Public Service Commission. And the letter reads the following. I write on behalf of the opposition of the United Workers' Party and the public at large in reference to certain alarming statements made by the Member of Parliament for Castries Central, Honourable Richard Frederick, during the October 12, 2023 broadcast of his television show, Can I Help You? During the show, he boasted that he'd been receiving and collating confidential information from police officers on private citizens. This statement not only brings our executive branch and the minister into disrepute, but is also an offense under the Section 3 of the Police Regulatory Cap 1401 of the revised laws of St. Lucia, which deals with the confidentiality of information, among other things. Our citizenry trust in the police force is predicated upon the expectation that its members execute their duties fairly, independently, prudently, without fear or favor,
and that they will uphold their oath to protect us all. The admission made by Minister Frederick of this unlawful alliance is deeply concerning, as it suggests collusion between a minister of government and those responsible for our safety and national security, whose duty it is to keep such information secret. It further confirms that confidential information, not meant for public consumption, has been shared unlawfully with a government minister. There are widespread fears that the same minister who has been on public rampage targeting political rivals and other persons critical of him and the Labour Party administration is using his access to confidential police information to intimidate and threaten such persons. Given the gravity of the allegations made by the minister, combined with previous threats made by him against members of the public, I am formally calling upon you, as the Commissioner of Police, if you have already not done so, to immediately launch an investigation into this matter and to lay charges against all offenders. This egregious situation, if left unchecked, will have serious implications for the integrity of and public confidence in our police force. The rule of law and the protection enshrined in our Constitution as it relates to the separation of powers. Your immediate action is required to preserve our national security. The St. Lucian public deserves nothing less. I think that those words and this letter speaks for itself. And it speaks volumes, hopefully, that persons understand the precarious situation that these remarks, allegations, comments have put our democracy in. It is rocking the core of our democracy and the separation of powers. Those separations of powers are there for a reason. And they are persons in our system that are responsible for the checks and balances. And I'm calling on all of those persons to react immediately to this confession that Richard Frederick has made. There's no doubt that he's done it. And given the previous allegations that were made against Richard Frederick as it pertained to Operation Restore Confidence, that the U.S. government clearly must have believed because they took away his visas. Allegations that the Labour Party made against two individuals, Stephenson King and Richard Frederick, and that those same individuals today are in this government's cabinet. I want to say for those persons who may not genuinely understand the implications of what has transpired, let me use maybe a more simpler analogy. When somebody steals goods and they go to sell those goods to someone else, if the person that they're selling it to suspects or knows that they are stolen goods and still buys those goods, they're complicit, meaning they are just as guilty as the people who stole the goods in the first place. What we don't know is that the collusion between the police officers that Richard made reference to and himself voluntarily? Or were they bribed? I don't know. But it's a good question to ask. And therefore, if it is a bribe, there's even deeper implications in this situation. This is dangerous. This is undermining the national security of our country. It is undermining the rule of law. So I'm going to end on this last statement. Yes. My colleague is reminding me that the extraction of information illegally didn't start today. We know that when we were in government, there was an example where Richard went on his show and displayed documents that came from cabinet. But more importantly, he displayed documents from DSH's bank account. And the officer at the bank that was involved in doing that was fired. So this is a gentleman that has had a habit of obtaining information illegally. But in this particular case, that he would have gotten the support of public officers who have an oath of allegiance to the public and to the Constitution of St. Lucia is really now beyond the pale. But I want to say this. Our faith in the Prime Minister is waning because the amount of lies that he's been caught in. But one thing that he's been consistent in saying is that he wants to be transparent and he's not going to tolerate any corruption in his cabinet. And if there was ever proof against any one of his ministers, he would immediately fire them. Well, Mr. Prime Minister, one of your ministers has provided you with the proof. The admission that he colluded, whether it's voluntarily or through bribery, to get and obtain information from the police force on private citizens, his admission that he's collecting files on those persons, and the action that he's been attacking citizens of this country is more than sufficient. And whether you want to accept it or not, is unlawful. It is illegal. It is an act of corruption. It is undermining the authority of our state. And we are expecting you to redeem yourself. Show us that there is some hope for St. Lucia. Some hope that somewhere inside of you, that there's some strength to do the right thing. And to end this nightmare of Richard Frederick and political life in St. Lucia. He is nothing but a menace to society. He has lied on a continual basis. He has manipulated people. He is manipulating the law. And I'm asking you to do the right thing today and to fire Richard Frederick and live up to the promise that you've made to the public of St. Lucia. I know you have not lived up to many promises, but this is one promise that you have to live up to for the sake of St. Lucia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, political leader. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, the actions of government officials clearly demonstrating corrupt behavior, lack of integrity, and of course the undermining of the rule of law, undermining of confidence in our institutions, because the very action of Richard Frederick as a minister of government proclaiming on television that he is able to compile information and compile files by getting information from police officers is in itself undermining the police force, the trust of the public in the police, And apart from this letter that has been sent to the police commissioner, who we are hoping will take speedy action to regain the good name of the police force, we are hoping that the Prime Minister, because these acts of corruption are coming from his office, he has placed Richard Frederick in his office, and Richard Frederick in a direct way represents his office. And if he is in collusion, he should let us know. If he endorses such behavior, he should let us know. But as a leader, as head of state, he should condemn those actions publicly in no uncertain terms and let us know that his government will not tolerate that behavior by dismissing Richard Frederick from his cabinet. Anything short of this will indicate to us the level or the lack of integrity of this government as a whole and the lack of regard for law and order and the upholding of sound principles and ethics in this country. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will now call on another colleague, Deputy Political Leader Guy Joseph, who will round off this press conference, after which you will have an opportunity to pose questions to the speakers.
Good morning to the press and to all our listeners and viewers following us. We are here today in a very somber mood, as you would observe. And this is a very, very serious matter that we are dealing with. I know sometimes people take everything to be political, but the two issues that is being addressed today by this team from the United Workers' Party, these are very pertinent issues. And we have deliberately decided to stick to these two subject areas for today. One of them, the cost of living, which my colleague Senator Dominic Fede was very elaborate on. But I think I need to re-emphasize. The cost of living today in St. Lucia is way beyond the average St. Lucian. It is not just the poor and indigent that is being affected by the cost of living, but our middle income people have been reduced to a level of poverty that is unprecedented in this country. And all we have heard from the government have been excuses. They have never told us what they can do to bring a measure of relief to the people. All we keep on hearing from the Prime Minister is what he cannot do. What we heard from the Minister of Commerce, who has direct responsibility and purview over the goods, especially on the supermarket shelves, is to kill it. That is what we are hearing. From the Prime Minister, matters that are raised, he says that's not your business. Now, we are in a situation in St. Lucia where we are, because, and I've said it, because a few of us can still buy bread and still buy some cheese and butter, does not mean that we should not feel for the mother, the single mother of 3 children, who does not know where bread is coming from tomorrow morning or this afternoon, so that the children can eat something to go to bed. And I do not accept that the government cannot do anything about the situation. Because the Prime Minister boasted in his last budget presentation how the country had earned in excess of $70 million of tax in additional revenue. So what they had projected, they collected much more. Why? Because the cost on the world market went up. And this was a simple formula that the government could have calculated the tax on the basis of the prices pre-COVID, so that it would give some relief to the people, because we are still in a recovery mode from the impact of the coronavirus. We are still on the recovery from the impact of the number of persons who had been out of work for a period of time. The people whose electricity bills had been suspended, they had to come back and pay these bills. The people, that's except those that the government paid for. The people who the bank had given a moratorium, they still have to meet their payments. So people have been in recovery mode from the impact of the coronavirus. And what we get from this government, apart from collecting all of this additional revenue, hiking the price of fuel to unprecedented numbers in St. Lucia. Fuel had reached $17.95 and remained there for a long period of time while the price had gone down on the world market. And the government kept on exploiting the people with collecting excess revenue on fuel. And that's not the first time a Labour Party government has done that. Remember when we raised the issues with the Orange March, and we said they were overcharging the people by more than $3. The week after the Orange March, or the fortnight after, we saw the price of fuel going down by the same numbers that the UWP in opposition had spoken about. So what we are seeing before us, again, the Prime Minister said that inflation is imported. That is a lie. There are goods that are imported and the cost has gone up. But the level of inflation in this country is not only imported, it is made in St. Lucia by the St. Lucia Labour Party government. This 2.5%, did it come from overseas? Did somebody import it into St. Lucia? The government sat, seeing that the prices have already gone up beyond the ability of the average St. Lucian who is employed. I'm not even talking about the unemployed. The average St. Lucian who is employed find it difficult. In fact, I saw somebody put out an ad that said, the most expensive vehicle to operate in St. Lucia today is the trolley at the supermarkets. That is the most expensive vehicle to operate. Because every day you walk into the supermarkets, the prices are changing. And it's not going down, it's going up. You know, so even if we complain about how high the price of fuel is, you can choose to park your vehicle and take public bus, even if they have raised the bus fares. But how do you not shop to feed your family? How do you not shop to cook and to provide free meals for your family, even though some people can only do 1 or 2, and in some instances, nothing? And we have a government who, in the midst of all of this, where you collected $70 million more than you had projected, and now you want to raise that to $110 million by imposing another 2.5%, that is supposed to generate in excess of $40 million of revenue for the government, and you are telling the people of St. Lucia that inflation is imported? Do you know what this $40 million can do for the people of St. Lucia if you leave their money in their pockets to spend as they see fit? So, Mr. Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre, this United Workers' Party is calling on your government, and as a leader of this government, to remove that 2.5% burden that you have put on the people of St. Lucia. It is not necessary, it is not for security, and it is not for health, because it is not reflected in the budget. For that matter, the amount on health went down and the amount on security went up. And if you do it, the two just balance off from what was there prior to the implementation of the levy. We have heard at the meeting with the Chamber of Commerce and the personnel from the Ministry of Finance that the money is not dedicated to any particular revenue stream. It is government revenue in general. So you have misled us into believing that it is for health and for security. And maybe that is why you are making the people suffer so much in the health sector to try and justify the 2.5, because there's nothing available at the hospitals, nothing available at the health centers. The quality of healthcare is the lowest that it has ever been in the history of this country, as far as I know. And I've been around for a few years. So we are calling on you to do the right thing. Remove this 2.5% tax on the people of St. Lucia. Mr. Prime Minister, if you fail to do so, the United Workers' Party will be returned into government. And one of the first taxes that will be removed is that 2.5 tax that you have put on the people of St. Lucia. But you have the opportunity to do it. You are the one who brought it in. Remember, you all brought in VAT at 15%. And when you and Dr. Anthony were in opposition, you all called it an oppressive tax. You went ahead and you implemented under the Labour Party the oppressive tax on the people. Well, this 2.5 is more than oppressive, because it is a compounded tax that you pay VAT even on the 2.5. And so, we know that the government can do it. We know that you have the fiscal space to be able to do it. We have given you several areas where you can cut back on reckless and useless spending. These days we have Zoom. Your ministers don't have to travel around the world. How many trips have we seen them making to Dubai? What have we gotten from Dubai? All the trips. Sometimes there are hardly any ministers on the island. How many of you went to Venezuela? You mean you needed that number of ministers on a trip to Venezuela? To do what? So, there are places where you can cut, and I am asking on behalf of the people. I'm not here speaking for myself or just for the UWP. I'm speaking on behalf of the Labour Party supporters who voted you. I'm speaking on behalf of the independents who did not vote, who voted. I'm speaking, we were supposed to have 2 independent candidates, but we know they are not independent. I am speaking on the behalf of the people who voted for them, thinking that there would be independent voices on their behalf. But they have sold them out to the Labour Party. So this UWP is here speaking today and calling upon you. And I know, Prime Minister, that it can be done. If you don't do it, it is just because of the heartless and reckless manner in which the Labour Party governs. And we know that the SLP is a heartless government. But if there is any semblance of a conscience left in anybody in the Labour Party, we are calling upon you all. Next cabinet meeting, have a discussion on this and remove this 2.5 burden. Can you imagine people have not been able to pay their rents and now they are required to pay an additional 2.5% on the rent? We have seen the price of water doubled in some instances, and people are saying, but I'm using the same amount of water. Why is my water bill going so high? We have seen electricity bills going up. We don't know what is happening. But there's one thing we know, is that the people are squeezing and the people are feeling the pressure. And they are feeling the cost of goods under this Labour Party government. And I know that if UWP was in office, it's not just the 2.5 we would have removed. There would be more measures in place targeted towards the poor and the vulnerable in this country. If UWP was in office, mothers would not have had to go and buy all these thousands of dollars worth of books for their children, because they would have received a device with all the books on it under UWP government. The 2 meal program that we had started at the schools would have continued and increased by now. So parents would have had a big relief in that the only meal they might have had to think about is to give the children supper when they get home. In some of the schools, we had started to look at the areas of breakfast for the children. So when we appeal to you, it is not just an appeal to play politics. This is serious. Some men feel the burden, not being able to get employment, not being able to provide for their children. And mothers have something special about them. It is rather unfortunate that the women in this Labour Party government, both at the Senate level and at the cabinet level, they behave as if they are men. They behave as if they are heartless people who don't feel anything. I mean, a reporter asking Emma, the Minister of Commerce, is there a possibility that there's price gouging? And your response to the reporter is kill it. You had secret meetings, you said, with the people, the GPH people about Soufre. How do I know you did not have secret meetings with the supermarket owners? When Chasney owned the supermarkets, the Labour Party was out there saying that it was Chasney who made the prices high. So now that Chasney do not have the supermarkets, who is making the price so high? So if you knew something back then, why don't you correct it now? What is going on? So we call on you to remove that 2.5%. And if you choose to listen, we will applaud you. If you choose not to listen, you are going to see the biggest protest that you have ever seen in the history of this country. And this is not a threat, Prime Minister. This is just information that we are giving you. You thought was the dry run. We are now coming with the real protest in Castries. And this is not a protest for UWP. This is a protest for every St. Lucian who is being affected by the policies of this government. I expect to see from church leaders to lawyers to economists to public servants, I expect to see every St. Lucian to come out and make a statement, because I know you can remove the 2.5%. Now let's move to the second subject. On the talk show on Thursday night, Minister Richard Frederick, who is from the office of the Prime Minister, and it must never be lost upon St. Lucians, that there is a reason why Prime Ministers make people ministers in their office. There is a reason for this. Prime Minister Pierre, you promised that if anyone can show you any evidence of corruption on the part of any of your ministers, you would take immediate and appropriate action by firing these persons. Well, it is not the UWP who said it. It was your minister himself who came on television and said that he had been compiling files on individuals and the police was bringing him information, was giving him information. Now, this is a serious matter. And this is not just for the Prime Minister. This is for all right-thinking St. Lucians. How do you know that your name is not among the names in those files? How do you know that your name, you are not being investigated for one reason or the other? Because it is apparent that people cannot speak and voice their concerns about this particular minister in the Prime Minister's office, or you cannot talk about the Prime Minister because he has a spokesman in his ministry who every Thursday night will attack everybody who speaks about the Prime Minister or speaks about himself. So, Prime Minister Pierre, you have a responsibility to all of us in St. Lucia to tell us whether you have sanctioned Minister Richard Frederick to do what he's doing on a Thursday night, and whether he has your endorsement to say the things that he has been saying about individuals. We saw the attack on Barbara Jacobs. Now, I know these people can handle themselves. They can. Mr. Peterkin, I think you got what you deserved, because you are one of those who came and said that the cost, the 2.5% is nothing much. But what they said about you is so much. But the 2.5 is not much, because you can afford to buy bread. You can afford to buy steak. Some people cannot afford to buy chicken backs. Now, that does not make Richard's attack on you right, you know. But you should be as vocal on this matter as you have been on other matters in the past. I move on. So, the Prime Minister promised us that he was not going to tolerate corruption. Isn't that what he promised us? So, and the media is there. This action, you heard from the Police Welfare Association president, that this action is corrupt. And it's in the letter that the Prime Minister or the leader of the opposition has forwarded to the police commissioner. Because if the police have done what Minister Richard said that they have done, then you have two sets of people to arrest. You have to arrest Richard Frederick, and you have to arrest the police officers who have done this. Now, when it's the little man on the street, so y'all went to Marvin's home, confiscated his computer, took his cell phone, brought him to the cell, and had him locked up on suspected bullying or whatever other things you all said he was doing on social media. Today you have a minister in the Prime Minister's office who has come out openly and indicated that he has committed a corrupt act with the police officers by receiving information that he was not entitled to receive. He's not an investigating officer. He was not functioning as a lawyer or as a judge. And even if he was as a lawyer, he should not be receiving information from the police. So, what is the government going to do about this? And I have a couple words for the senators who are calling. Alison Jean, you posted on social media that Alan Chasney should be arrested. What has Alan Chasney done to be arrested? I want to know whether you, Alison Jean, have called for the arrest of Richard Frederick for the statements that he made on his talk show about compiling files on individuals in St. Lucia. You see, we cannot operate by double standards. And when you have people who have been given the privilege to operate as senators, you are helping to form legislation. You are passing and voting on legislation in this country, and you are going to ask for the arrest of an innocent man, while the man who has committed the crime, you are not calling for his arrest. What kind of senator are you? Are these the people we have in St. Lucia who have become lawmakers? If you don't think that if Alan Chasney had done something and the police felt it was necessary to arrest him, that they would have done it, but y'all are not satisfied. Because you want St. Lucia to become a police state, where the police can just do as they want and as they please. And even when the police try to uphold the law in an amicable way, to bring peace rather than strife, you as a senator, you are posting on social media that people should be arrested. There are more people in the cabinet and in the Senate and in the government that you are part of that needs to be arrested. Have you called for their arrest and their removal? And I want the people of St. Lucia to pay attention to what is happening. Because when you come into the Labour Party, you have to sing from a certain hymn book. You have to behave a certain way to remain relevant. And that is why I said the women in the Labour Party are behaving as if they are men. You would expect men to go and make these kinds of, because that is what our society is shaped like. But to get acceptance in the Labour Party, they have to do things that are unbecoming of women in order to get validation and approval. And I'm saying that should not be. The women in the United Workers' Party are highly respected. And even when they don't agree with us as men, you don't see, we never criticize them for what they do. Because at the end of the day, it is the right of a woman to be a woman and not to pretend that they are a man, because we see politics as being part of a man's world. No, we treat our women with equal rights. And there are things that women can speak about that no man can speak about. There are things that women feel that no man can feel. And all of us who are loving mothers, sisters, wives, would understand that. Women have certain intuition that men just don't have. But it's so sad to see that our women are behaving heartless in the Parliament of St. Lucia. So we need to put right where right is. So you have received the information, Prime Minister, of corruption. In fact, the old people say, si pani sutuyez, pani vole. If the police did not have somebody to bring the information to, they would not have taken the information. Where would they bring it to? They wouldn't bring it to the United Workers' Party. So why would they give information? And I move on. Usually the little people on the streets, sometimes somebody go and steal some oranges and they go and sell it to a vendor. They arrest the vendor. There was a vendor in Babono that was arrested. I know because she was receiving stolen goods, they said. So they arrest both the person who sold the goods and the person who received the goods. Why is not the same? So why did it have to call UWP to call a press conference to deal with this matter? In fact, the statement was made on Thursday night. I expected by Friday morning that the police should have been out with a statement denouncing this. Because here we are in a crime-infested country. Crime is on the rise. How can we trust our police officers? How can the citizenry trust the police officers to give them information of which vehicle they saw, which person they saw? There are burglaries happening. People have cameras at their homes. You think they will want to share the information with the police when they know that information they give can reach Richard Frederick or other persons? Now, here's the scary part of this. This is the part that Richard has told us. What about the other things that are happening that he has not told us or we don't know about? That is what should get us scared. At least we know this one. So we know that the police is compiling information and passing it on to Richard Frederick. Prime Minister, law and order in this country begins and ends with you. You can say what you want. You are the Minister of Security. You can try to pass the buck because you said it was your father who was a police officer. Today you said you're not the commissioner.
I don't know.
You don't know. So why are you the minister and you don't know? Now I have a simple statement to make on this. I believe that our Prime Minister has been a follower for so long that he does not recognize that he is the Prime Minister and he is the leader. Because every leader in this country would know. How can you be the Prime Minister and you not know what is in the impacts report? Every Monday morning, I hope it continues, the police would be reporting to the office of the Prime Minister to update the Prime Minister of events that transpired during the last week. Now that is the Prime Minister when the Prime Minister was not the Minister of Security. So I could imagine today with the Prime Minister being the Minister for Security, that he would get daily updates from the police as to what is happening. And you want to come on television and you want to tell the whole nation, it's not Dale Elliott you responded to. You responded to St. Lucia by telling St. Lucia, I don't know anything about this. Prime Minister, you really expect us in St. Lucia to believe that you don't know anything? When the Labour Party said so much about the impacts report in opposition and in Operation Restore Confidence, when impacts was commissioned by a Labour Party government. So are you telling the people of St. Lucia that Kenny Anthony had so little regard for you as the deputy leader of the party? You wanted to go to your home and take a letter, stop Parliament, to tell us you are Deputy Prime Minister. When we questioned the position of Deputy Prime Minister, you requested of the Parliament, stop, and you go in home and take your letter that you are appointed Deputy Prime Minister. And you're telling the nation today you have graduated to be Prime Minister and you don't know anything about impacts. You did not even listen to the reporter's question. Well, if you didn't listen, we are calling on you to listen now and to hear what we are saying. So, I want to ask a further question. Will these files lead to a hit list? Why are the files? And I don't want to say my own words, you know. This is a report. U.S. suspends police assistance for St. Lucia over alleged killings. August 22nd, 2013. Just one line. Anthony, during his speech, that's Dr. Anthony, during his speech on Tuesday, confirmed seeing such a list while he was in opposition. Maybe I should read the paragraph before. The alleged extrajudicial killings stem from the circulation of a hit list targeting persons deemed to be criminals. 5 suspects whose names were on the list were shot and killed during the police operations. And the report goes on to say, Anthony, during his speech on Tuesday, confirmed seeing such a list while he was in the opposition. So if Dr. Anthony confirmed that he saw a list, how did that list come about? Because I know I was in government. I know my colleague Montut was in government. I know my colleague Alan was in government. None of us saw a list. So it means that that list was compiled outside of the remit of cabinet, and the 2 persons mentioned in the impacts report are now both members of the cabinet of the St. Lucia Labour Party. So St. Lucians, you can think that politicians are targets. But here's something for the businessmen. And you heard it from the political leader. Dr. Kenny Anthony, when he came to address the nation, said that there were politicians, there were businessmen, and there were policemen involved.
Colluded or corrupt?
They colluded together in the corruption that was happening. St. Lucia, this is a serious situation. There is a minister in the Prime Minister's office. And Philip J. Pierre, you can say your ministers have not been fingered. That is not fingers alone, you know. These are hands.
He fingered himself.
This is more than a finger. This is a whole hand that we are talking about there. And the evidence is there. You commissioned the study. You commissioned the investigation, St. Lucia Labour Party, under Kenny Anthony. The Leahy law was imposed on St. Lucia because the U.S. believed that there was a hit list. Maybe, Dr. Anthony, you made it available to them. I don't know. Because if you saw it, or did you testify to them? Today, what has changed about Richard Frederick? He's changed from being a member of the United Workers' Party to being a member of the St. Lucia Labour Party. And I'm appealing to all Labour Party supporters in St. Lucia. You criticize us. You condemned us for having a man like this in a UWP government. Now I want to make a statement. Alan Chasney will always be under attack from Richard Frederick on his show every Thursday. You know why? This is the only leader in St. Lucia who has stood up to Richard Frederick. Not even the great Sir John. When Richard won the by-election and they wanted to bring him into the party, Sir John said, I didn't choose him. Y'all chose him. Y'all want him. I'm giving him to y'all. These were his words in the boulevard. Stevenson King, after the UWP had made a decision that Richard Frederick would not run the elections, should not even have come to the rally in Dennery in 2011. He came, and Spider paid a heavy price because he was the MC at the meeting. And the next thing we knew, Richard was involved in running the elections. Stevenson King could not stand up to him. Today we have both Kenny Anthony and Philip J. Pierre. Kenny Anthony, you said all what you said. You all sit on the same side of the parliament today. And even if you don't go to cabinet, you are as guilty as everybody else in the process. All the things you said, Alan just read, our political leader just read some of it in your statements about Richard. But I suspect the you know what I know and you know is what have you all together, because you all know about each other. Philip J. Pierre, you have not been able to stand up to Richard Frederick. The only man in this country, the only leader who stood up to Richard was Alan Chasney when Richard was fired from the United Workers' Party under the leadership of Alan Chasney. And we must not forget, there were operatives of Stevenson King who took the party to court in the person of Mark Louis. I don't give you stories, you know. I give you the facts to back up what I'm saying. And so we have seen, and we know that there are many Labour Party supporters who do not support what is happening there, but they are powerless. They are voiceless today. They cannot speak because it's their party doing the dirty work today on the people of St. Lucia. And Prime Minister, this goes beyond the shores of St. Lucia. We cannot have a minister in the Prime Minister's office who has police officers colluding with him to bring files out on individual citizens of this country. I don't know what his connection was with the hit list. The report has enough information, but I think every right St. Lucian need to be thinking, will my name appear on these files? And will I be part of a hit list? And a hit list does not necessarily mean people that they want to execute, you know. A hit list could mean a lot of things. Will I be a target? Will Spider be a target? Will the average citizen out there who has a voice or who was at the demonstration, would they be targets? We are calling on you, Prime Minister, do the right thing, not for yourself, not for the Labour Party, but for the country. You cannot have a minister in your office who is engaged in such activity, who has broken the law, who has been involved in corrupt practices with police officers, and would come on national television and state that to the people of St. Lucia, and no action will be taken. So there are two things we require of you, Prime Minister. Deal with the Richard situation in your office. We are calling on you to remove Richard from his position until the investigation is completed and he is cleared. And then remove the 2.5% burden that you have put on the people of St. Lucia. This, we have given you adequate notice and warning about this, because this is not just a UWP matter. This is a St. Lucia matter, and we will take the appropriate steps as the opposition to lead the march and call St. Lucians to demand what is right and just for all of us in St. Lucia. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Political Leader Guy Joseph. And ladies and gentlemen, just before I open the floor to questions from the media, we have some questions coming from those who have been following on Facebook. And Senator Fede, a question for you. The first question was for you. Someone wants you to explain what exactly do you mean by a compound tax?
Thank you, Spider. Thanks for the question. What I simply mean is that the 2.5% is not just applied on one transaction. So let's take, for example, Massey stores. Why a lot of the items that are sold at Massey stores, whether they attract the tax or not, are going to see price increases is because I have listed that Massey stores, their costs will go up, paying 2.5 for brokerage fees when the container comes in, paying 2.5 on security, which in the services side, paying 2.5 on accounting, paying 2.5 to truck those items to the store, paying 2.5 on the rental facilities. Now we see even the NHC has said that 2.5 will apply to their tenants. Even the National Housing Corporation has given a notice. Digicel has sent a notice, for example, for services to their consumers, that their consumers are going to have to pay that extra 2.5%. So we see that there are many 2.5% along the line with no opportunity for people to have a rebate. So with VAT, you have a refund, yeah. But with the 2.5%, it is just adding up, and there's a domino effect, which is going to raise the cost of businesses, and businesses are going to pass those extra costs on to you, the people of St. Lucia watching. I hope that that's clear.
So I now invite questions. Are there any questions from the members of the media present here?
My question is on the matter of Richard Frederick. You've said that while he was a member of your cabinet, that you received a lot of backlash from the then opposition, say the Labour Party. Dr. Anthony is well known as saying that he was the worst thing to ever happen to politics in St. Lucia, and a number of statements were made. But Richard Frederick has always been Richard Frederick. So what was different when he was a member of your cabinet, or a member of the United Workers' Party? How was his conduct different from what it is now?
So I think that the question is, when Richard Frederick was in a
cabinet, we shared a cabinet with him. What is the difference between him now and back then? So I can say to you that the person that maintained Richard in cabinet was Stephenson King. And I think that Guy gave you the example that when we got to the elections, and there was finally proof. The proof was that the U.S. government withdrew his personal visa and his diplomatic visa. It's an unprecedented move. And it was on the based on the allegations that were being made at the time by the Labour Party that Richard Frederick was involved in Operations Restore Confidence. He was one of the key persons in coordinating and instructing the police officers. It is after we lost the election, when I took over the helm of the United Workers' Party, and the WikiLeaks information came out, in which the information and the suspicions about Richard were confirmed in a report that the U.S. ambassador sent back to the State Department, in which he said that I hope the Solutions know that they are electing an individual who is suspected of being in money laundering and drug trafficking at the time. And I remember specifically when I took over the leader of the party to ask Richard that he needed to clear his name. And one of the things was to obtain his visa. And when he was not able to do that, and I held him accountable to that, and said to him that he could not run in the election. And that was a very difficult decision to make, because Richard was still a very popular person. He had won his seat, unlike some other persons who had not won their seat. But I felt very strongly that we had to be able to defend the character of the persons in our party. And there was enough evidence out there to suggest that Richard was of a bad character. So I think that as more and more information came on, United Workers' Party did take a stance. It ended up going to court. We won the court case to have Richard expelled from the party. What is astonishing to me is that a person like Kenny Anthony, in a recent interview that he did, I think it was on NBC, somehow was trying to hold me in particular accountable for impacts. I mean, it seems to me that he's lost his mind. And it's the audacity of him to try to convince people of that when there is so much evidence to the contrary. It's him and Philip Pierre and other members of the party, Alva Baptist, Moses Jean-Baptiste, who made all these allegations about Richard Frederick and Stephenson King. And that when the impacts report was completed, and instead of handing over the impacts report to the DPP, the then Prime Minister chose to go on TV, national TV, and confirm to the general public that there was a hit list. Indicated there was politicians. Who the politicians he thinks he was referring to? It's referred to and it says it in the report. Now, what we have to also be concerned at is that there is a report, there is a statement that's being made that the DPP has written to the Commissioner of Police to arrest police officers involved in the 2 remaining impact cases. That's the case with Beige and the killings in View Fort.
Another question. At the time of the impacts report, what ministry was Richard Frederick responsible for? Was it housing?
Yep.
Why would a minister of housing be so intimately involved in a police operation? He was not the Minister of National Security. He was not the Minister of Home Affairs. Why was he able to be so intimately involved in such a police operation?
Well, you can ask Steve that, because I mean, at the end of the day, I know that Richard. I don't know this firsthand, because I can only say to you that certainly in the discussions that I've heard, people I've spoken to, that when Richard was elected in 2006, that he wanted to be the Minister of National Security. And Sir John clearly, who had his skepticism, is that the right way to put it, or his concerns, did not allow that. I certainly know that when there was the shakeup in the Stephenson King administration, and Stephenson King came very close to having to be removed as the Prime Minister of the country by his own colleagues, and there was a reassignment of portfolios. I know he lobbied one more time to try to become the Minister of National Security. But you see, that's why what Guy Joseph is saying, I want people to really understand and appreciate. The fact that the Ministry of National Security is in the Prime Minister's office, and now that he is a minister in the Prime Minister's office, and that you heard for yourself where you have a Prime Minister who's supposed to be responsible, saying, I don't know. So how do we believe that nobody is providing day-to-day direction to it? I know that there's a guy called Wayne Gerard providing day-to-day advice, if I'm not mistaken, to the Ministry of Finance and to the Ministry of Economic Development. So who's to say that Richard is not responsible? We don't know. And the fact is that there's nothing that this government can say right now that we can trust. Because I've just never seen people blatantly lie to the extent that they have. I mean, look at the situation with the Panama account. The former Prime Minister came to Parliament and said to everybody in Parliament that there was a Panama account. The Prime Minister, who would have known otherwise, didn't correct him. The following day, the Prime Minister went on a radio show, had an opportunity to correct the information. And what did he say? He's not going to provide the details. He's not done the investigation. And therefore, he leaves it to speculation. And now to find out that the information that Richard Frederick put up on his screen about the account, the bank is called Panashin. It is a Taiwanese account. The SWIFT number is for an account in Taiwan. You had the ambassador of Taiwan. You've had the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Taiwan say there was nothing that was done wrong, and to say to the media down here locally there was never a Panama account. So when people are going to lie to that extent of things that are so easily proven one way or the other, when a former Prime Minister who is literally the poster child of impacts, he went on national TV and boasted to redeem himself that I was right that there was a hit list and that there was all these levels of corruption, and to want to convince anybody that he was not involved. And the allegation that my administration, when we came into office in 2016, that we promised to resolve impacts in 3 months, is absurd. Is not the Prime Minister's office that can resolve impacts. Cannot. The only thing the Prime Minister's office, and I kept on repeating that, the only thing the Prime Minister's office can do is make the necessary resources available to the DPP. So we're going to do a roundtable discussion on Sunday. And at that roundtable discussion, we're going to go in depth and details of Operation Restore Confidence, impacts, and where we are today. Because that is a whole story in itself, and it's important that people make the distinction between Operations Restore Confidence, impacts, and the sanctions that have been put on, and where we are today, and where the DPP's office and what happened. Because people will be shocked to know that when we came into office in 2016, the evidence that was the Jamaicans had collected was in Jamaica. It wasn't even in St. Lucia. So the DPP's office has had a lot of work to do. And that's why it's even more shocking, disturbing, irresponsible for a Prime Minister to say he doesn't know, something as important as this that is going to deal with the reputation, the Leahy law is still there. All that happened with the Leahy law is that it was watered down at the end of our term based on the work that we've done. And I don't want to put my words, because you know what? Sometimes people want to misconstrue what I say. Go and see the speech of the ambassador, the United States ambassador, in 2021, when she came here to St. Lucia with members from Washington, D.C., and with national security advisors, as to why they allowed St. Lucia now to re-enter the training of police officers. And what is left to do right now is for the DPP to make the decision. Now, if in fact that he's made the decision, we have to ask the question, what's next? But we're going to go into substantial more detail when we have that time, when we have the roundtable discussion.
So about the hit list, Kenny Anthony, who was in opposition at the time, said that he saw the list. Mr. Joseph just said that neither he nor any of his colleagues ever saw such a list. In fact, I have two part questions. One, who was the Minister of National Security at the time?
Guy Mears. And Guy Mears has been on record to say that he never saw any hit list.
So I think the police themselves said that as well.
Yeah. So look, at the end of the day, sorry.
So the Minister of National Security at the time has no knowledge of a list. Yet the leader of the opposition at the time does. How is that even possible?
So you have to ask him. I mean, at the end of the day, though, he would have not only said it, but he would have also expressed that opinion to the U.S. and to the Canadians and to the British and to the Europeans. And I would imagine that they would have had their own intelligence. So all I can say on this matter is that this is a very dark period for St. Lucia. I would like to think that we have learned from that process, because many of our institutions have been tested, so including a coroner's inquest. You know, but there are some people, and I want us to really appreciate what I'm going to say, is that if the coroner's inquest was incompetent, okay, not capable of really doing what they were supposed to do, but if they were incompetent to everybody on an equal basis, then it was nothing biased. If it was deliberately incompetent or deliberately tried to cover up these issues on this particular issue, that's a very different matter. And so I think that that's really the point of the overall investigation. But our job as politicians, to be policymakers, is to strengthen the institutions that we have of checks and balances. And that's why what we are talking about here today is that the fact that a minister would have made that comment on a Thursday night, there was no comment and reaction by the police. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and here we are today, Monday. We're here today on Tuesday. Now, I was grateful that the Welfare Association came out yesterday, and he was very clear, and he's 100% right. This is an act of corruption. Even if the persons were not bribed. But if they were bribed, that's even worse. Because the question is, if the minister could buy the information, who else could buy the information? And it reinforces in statements made by people that they don't trust the police. Even the same Kenny Anthony, how many times has he said the police are corrupt? How many times has he said the people in Vieux Fort don't trust the police? Okay? So the point is, in saying it, but how are you going to correct it? Because you cannot have a police force that is empowered, and remember, you gave them now through the Suppression Act even more power. An ordinary police officer can go into your home. An ordinary police officer can tell you you can't leave your home for 72 hours. An ordinary police officer can go and search your car or stop you on the side of the road. So how do those two things, they conflict with each other? And there's too much conflicting information that is not supporting the policy positions of the government. So again, conflicting is that you're saying that you're going to take corruption serious, you're going to hold people accountable, there's going to be no tolerance, and yet bananas land. I mean, you'd have to be blind not to think that there's something wrong. Rovergate, as I said, the situation with the Jufali account. It's not whether there was a joint account. That's irrelevant, guys. It's a fact, but it's irrelevant. The fact is that your accountant general said that the account was opened up illegally, that she doesn't know why Jufali would have put the money in the first place and for what, and that monies were spent without the permission of the Ministry of Finance. So you have a prime minister on one hand who's all of a sudden talking about consolidated account, and we shouldn't breach it. Here it is that £66,000 was provided by Jufali and not put into the consolidated account. You can't have it one way and not the other way. There has to be some level of consistency in what we're doing. And I don't want us to leave here today for solutions to in any way believe it's business as usual. What has transpired on Thursday, and given the history of this individual in politics, and given that we know that he's been threatening citizens of this country, this is a damning and dangerous event, and needs to be taken with full seriousness. And we're giving the government and the Prime Minister every opportunity to resolve this matter. But if they don't, the same level of organization and mobilization that we did for View 4, we're going to redo it again. Because I've said from day one, I did not expect to get any level of accountability or opportunity in Parliament. And we've seen it. The government with two people have tried to get me suspended indefinitely, have tried every way to harass. Two people. Two, you have 15. Two voices. And look at what you're doing to try to oppress those voices. In the public's eye. So when I was arrested and detained in the house, that was on TV. That's what they were doing to the leader of the opposition. Who are you? And Ernest Hilaire said something. All of us must know that these things are not said lightly. We are seeing what Richard is doing and what he has said. We know the awesome power that ministers have in cabinet and the influence they have on other departments in government. And those are things that are taking place behind the scenes. So the hit list could be to say, Inland Revenue is going to go and audit you, that you're not going to get planning approval, you can't get your passport, you can't get your driver's license, okay, that they're going to frustrate you. That's what we have to be cognizant of. And so we have a responsibility to make sure, and remember I keep on saying to solutions, the Constitution is an agreement, a contract between individual solutions and the government of solution, that is giving them the authority to run the country, but they're not to use that power against any one of us individually, because you're giving government extraordinary powers. Here it is right before our very eyes, the evidence that that is what's taking place. And what are we going to do? And what is the Prime Minister going to do, where the credibility of our government and our democracy is at stake? And I'm calling on all of people of civil society. Wake up. There'll become a point where you really cannot speak. Because we see that we're entering into a police state. We see that we're entering a dictatorship with this government. And we saw what happened to the Jews in Germany because of silence. Thank you.
Given that you march on Saturday. Some updates on that.
I first of all have congratulated the organizers in the party for an amazing event. The planning, the coordination, the implementation were superb. I can't even begin to thank the public that came out. I think that the numbers of people that came out exceeded our own expectations. I think that the government should be very concerned, because I think that what we achieved at the march was to show that there are people who are angry enough to overcome their fear of coming to view for it. Okay? To march. And that I'm hoping, and I believe, that a lot of people who may have been fearful of coming out would have understood how many people came out. So I genuinely believe that 70% of the people of this country are very unhappy with the direction this country is going in. And as Guy has said, and I think that Bradley, I really want to applaud him for what he said, is that the persons that should have been leading that march should have been civil society. And let us not confuse the vacuum of leadership in this country and that the decision by the United Workers' Party to take up that space and to speak for the voiceless in this country, that this is political. And the next march, we really want everyone to know that certainly the base of United Workers' Party is engaged, and we're hoping that those persons who may have voted for Labour and are disappointed, independents who may have voted for Labour now have realized that this thing has gone wrong, persons who did not vote and may have realized that that was a mistake in not voting, but everybody who feels this country is going in the wrong direction, everybody who recognizes the two issues that we've brought up here today, the cost of living, and the government can do something about it. It's their deliberate hand that they're putting this tax on. And certainly the undermining of our democracy and what that is possibly going to, how it's going to affect all of us individually and our own security in our home, our ability to progress ourselves, and to live in a state of fear, that we have to come out. And Richard Frederick has been and is a menace and has been one to the political life in St. Lucia. And I know that there are some people who adamantly support him, but the fact is that he has continuously challenged the rule of law in this country and has done things that are extremely unorthodox. And he is a very good convincer. And you know, do not underestimate in any way. Richard Frederick was a police officer. He knows very well the oath that he has to the police and to the public, and the importance of secrecy of information. Yeah? So this is not an ordinary person that's committing this. It's a police officer and a lawyer. Now, I'm not even getting into the reputation of Richard as a lawyer, because it only supports some of the things we're seeing. I don't think we need to go there, because his statement speaks for itself. I have been receiving information from police officers on individual citizens of those countries, of those people, and I have been collating that information into a file. For what? What you're saving the information for?
My question is about this cost of living. Now, the government has proposed a review of minimum wage. We've said that we are in the process of working out minimum wage across different sectors.
A livable wage.
They said minimum wage and livable wage, right? They use both terms. In your opinion, is this going to have any impact at all on helping the public deal with the rising cost of living, the cost of inflation, and all of that?
Yeah. So our advice to the government is to do your job, grow the economy, create real jobs for people. At this present time, it is clear with the rising cost of inflation, the rising cost of taxes, businesses can't take any more taxes. The costs for businesses are extremely high. And so what the government needs to ensure is that the number one factor to drive people's salaries should be the demand for labor. And so the unemployment rate is extremely high. And so the government has got to continue where we have started. I'm very proud of what we have done. When we look at the youth unemployment rate, for example, in 2015, it was 41%. We brought that down 10 points. We saw a significant reduction in the national unemployment rate as well, which came down, by the way, before COVID to 16.8%, which is just below 17. Now, that is with the methodology of the Central Statistics Department. The government has since changed that methodology, and they're using the ILO methodology, which will give them a more attractive unemployment rate. Even so, it is still very much in line with what the United Workers' Party had registered under the old measurement. Now, if they had used the Central Statistics Department methodology,
It'd be much higher.
right, it would be at least 20-something%. So the unemployment situation in this country is out of control. The government needs to get very busy in growing the economy, creating jobs, and giving businesses the momentum so that we can drive this problem
And
down.
notwithstanding that, we are in unique circumstances. And I think that a minimum wage is absolutely necessary because of the market situation, the businesses, to Dominic's point, aren't in a position to give higher wages. So it's something that's going to have to be legislated. They're not going to do it on their own. And in the absence of a proper social net system, there has to be, and we have to be cognizant and mindful of that situation. This is made worse because of what's taking place with inflation. And that is why we are here today and demanding that the government drop the 2.5%, because the 2.5% is only making a very bad situation substantially worse. And so in the absence of implementing a minimum wage at this point, and in the absence of having a proper social net system, that the government needs to do everything it can to reduce the impact. So not only should they be eliminating this tax, but we think that there are other things that the government can do, which we've highlighted in a plan, to further reduce the impact of inflation in this country. And Dominic is 100% correct. Ultimately, what you want to do is to create real jobs. I'm disappointed that with Ojo Labs and ITEL BPO in the South in particular, and the momentum that we created there, while ITEL has continued to increase the numbers, we don't believe they've increased as fast as they can. The absence of DSH, the construction work that they have stopped, the slow progress at Cabot, the slow progress in some of the other projects, the airport and at St. Jude's, these are all contributing significantly to undermining the livelihoods of people in this country.
Okay. I think at this juncture it is for me to thank members of the media and for me to thank all those who have been following us on live stream. I want to, though my colleague has done it, take this opportunity once again to thank all of those who came out on Saturday for the protests that took place in Vieux-Fort. Please stay tuned for further imminent action led by the United Workers' Party in the name and honor of our country. I want to invite you on Sunday to follow a roundtable discussion that will take place. And at that roundtable discussion, the main topics will be impacts. The questions that were not being answered by your Prime Minister when asked by a journalist, a lot of it, some light will be shed on a lot of it, and some of the realities of the impacts report will be brought to light. Some of what transpired during the Operation Restore Confidence and all of these things, we will shed some light on it. So please tune in. We will give you more details as to exactly what time and We'll be sharing the links. We want you to join us as we delve into this serious subject for discussion, and you will be able to see for yourself the links between what transpired then and what is happening now, and who are the subjects, the culprits associated with some of the threatening possibilities that are looming over us as a country if we do not, as a country, take a stand and take stock of where some of our government leaders and officials are heading and are leading the country. It is not for us to take for granted what is happening now. You may not see yourself as being implicated in what is going on there right now, but no one is safe, no one is immune. You can never tell where this might end up. First, it was a hit list of criminals. It can be a hit list of government officials. It can be a hit list of politicians, business people, ordinary citizens. We must ensure that we create an atmosphere in this country where people don't have to live in fear, and that no tyrant can flourish in this country to intimidate St. Lucians. So with this, I want to thank everyone who has been following. I want to thank you, the media, and we'll be in touch again. Thank you.
That's not your business. 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 That's not your business.
The road has impacted me and my family, my business, in the way that before, if I'm not here as yet and my customers call me, I would have to tell them wait 30 to 45 minutes. But now, when they call me, I tell them, okay, give me 10, 15 minutes. Some of them even up to just Gaza. The road good, I go come and meet you. They just come in now.
Since the rehabilitation was has commenced, although it is not 100% completed, but we are already realizing an increase in finances, in the time as to when we get to Solibus. It takes approximately 5 minutes from Pierre to Solibus as opposed to a half an hour. I would like to personally endorse Bradley Felix for our next rep in the coming general election.
I approve him because he's working and I see he keep on working.
Over the past 5 years, every single decision we have taken has been to fertilize prosperity for today and to sow the seeds of progress for our nation 10 years from now. Every budget we delivered, every investment we attracted, every infrastructural project we approved, and those we re-engineered are meant for our children, our future, our St. Lucia. The United Workers' Party. Let's keep working.
We can't trust labor. We can't trust labor. Between 2012 and 2016, labor destroyed our lives. They made us poorer by making us pay higher electricity bills. We can't trust labor. They made us poorer by making us pay higher water bills. They made us poorer by making us pay higher food bills. Then they took away 5% of our money as workers. No one was safe. Even the dead were made to pay VAT. They put VAT on funerals. They are the same old Labour Party. They haven't changed. Don't go backwards with Labour.
Members, the question is that be it resolved, the House of Assembly agrees to the lifting of the suspension without prejudice to the legal action by the member for Mico South against his suspension, and be it further resolved that the lifting of the suspension shall be effective immediately following the passage of this motion, and the member will be at liberty to carry on his duties in service of the House and the constituency of Mico South. I now put the question. As many as have that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as have a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, and I'm saying, and I'm asking everyone to watch what they eat and eat what they watch. Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Wait, first of all, you're not going to speed past that like you didn't just say what you just said.
Watch what they eat and eat what they watch.
Less than 2 years into the reign of the Labour regime, St. Lucia's patrimony is not only under threat by Philip Pierre's bad policies, but is being recklessly sold to friends, family and foreigners. The latest act of detaching St. Lucia from her most prized lands came with the sale of the Banand lands along the Castries Harbour. The lands were owned by the National Housing Corporation. In 2013, the 2.5 acres was valued at about $70 a square foot for a total cost value of $7 million, proving to be a valuable asset for the state. However, in December of 2021, a decision was taken by Housing Minister Richard Frederick to dispose of the high-value asset. Former SLP Senator and prospective candidate Terence Skinny Sinclair was hired to undertake the property valuation. His report assessed the market value at $3.5 million. That's half of what the lands were going for 10 years ago. Prime waterfront property enclosing one of the most scenic ports in the Caribbean, with thriving commercial and tourism activity. And for